All right. Okay, well, welcome here, my dear friend, Michael Shrieve. I'm so excited to get this opportunity to sit down and talk with you about your Drums of Compassion album and wherever that may take us in conversation.
Yeah, it's great to talk with you too, Dave. And I
Awesome.
know it's going to take us in different places because I've been speaking about it quite
Hmm.
often in trying to get the word out about the record being out there and doing interviews.
Yeah,
And what I'm realizing in discussing it is I'm learning a lot about myself while talking about it. And
isn't that
so,
amazing?
yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's amazing. And I mean, one of the most interesting things about it is that it's taken so long. And
Hmm. Yeah.
almost 25 years. And the journey started when it started in my 20s. But for this specific record, the journey started when, where I used to live in Seattle, you used to come over
Yeah.
all the time. And the family would go to sleep and I would go out and I'd
Right.
go listen to music and explore all kinds of music, because there was a pretty good avant-garde scene here too,
Hmm.
theater and also multimedia stuff that I really enjoyed,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
just bands and I really enjoyed. I love going around there just like by myself, going all around town and just
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. You
and
were always checking out the latest things. Yeah.
always checking out stuff. And then I'd come home at night, and how do you kind of slow down?
Hmm.
So, I mean, I'm aware of meditation, but what kind of music do I put on? And what kind of music I got put on was more like choral music and classical music or music that chilled, ambient and
Right.
like, okay, let's wind down from the evening. And then
Uh-huh.
I asked myself the question, what kind of music could I make as a drummer that I
Hmm.
would want to put on at 2:30 in the morning?
Right.
Because I don't want to hear a bunch of drums when I come home.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and so
I
that's
don't
what
want to groove. I don't want to James
I don't want
Brown
to
groove.
groove.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I want to float down the river. And so this is where the journey started. Like, okay, so imagine that.
Hmm.
That was the prompt.
Hmm. And I think, as I can imagine, knowing you as I do, that the journey started long before then too, with all of your influences of like, I mean, Olatunji, for instance, if we want to just talk about, I mean, that is an influence. Like, how did you weave that thread through the whole project? It seems like it's super integral part. I mean, his album called Drums of Passion,
Comes
yours
to
called,
passion.
and
Yeah.
yours is called Drums of Compassion.
Yes.
And there's obviously Olatunji appearing on your album multiple times. So weave that tapestry a little bit for me.
Yeah. And it definitely was a weave, and it wasn't on purpose where it all happened like that. But the first thing I thought of was because I had worked with people, well, somebody like Stomo Yamashita, and he
Hmm.
was
Yeah.
a huge influence on me, a Japanese
Hmm.
percussion that was at the peak of his classical career, where important composers in Europe were composing pieces for him for performance.
Hmm.
And he was a star, and then he left that and started his own theater company. And I discovered him one day because of playing in Santana and then having this drum solo at Woodstock that I was expected to play a drum solo every night. And so, of course, I would be listening to a ton of drummers to get ideas and be influenced. But I walked into a record store in Berkeley, California called Leopold's, famous place. And it was in the day when they'd be playing the vinyl, and then they'd have a stand and they'd show the record that's being played, right?
Right. Yeah. Sure.
And this was a gatefold, and the album cover had this Japanese guy with hair all the way down his back, timpani stick in his mouth, leaping in midair across the stage full of drums and percussion. And the
Right.
music was wild.
Mm-hmm.
Just, I was like, oh my God, who is this?
Yeah. Yeah. More of this, please.
More,
Yeah.
please. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I bought everything. And
Yeah.
I mean, there was one piece of music that he had called Prison Song, and it
Hmm.
was just all metal. It was just all like the sound of prison, chains and bars.
Right. Wow.
And it just like it started me thinking that there's another world out there that is parallel but not the same as the one I've been walking in. And so I pursued him for quite a
Hmm.
while, for
Hmm.
over a year. and finally met him with my interest wanting to do experimental classical percussion sort of
Okay.
thing. And so we finally met after 250-day tour, and the last day of the tour in a hotel in Rome. It was like, because I wasn't going to be there anymore that year, and somehow it
So
happened.
you had
And
been on tour for 250 days with
yeah,
Santana, and he shows up in Rome. Wow.
and he's in Rome. Yeah, he's based in London, but
Okay.
he's very worldly. He's from Japan. I went to his room. I knocked on the door, and he's about 5'2", and he's standing there like a shogun. He
Mm,
had so much stature, and
mm,
he had so much dignity. And
mm,
I was like, "Oh, hello, I'm Michael." And within an hour, we were both on the floor laughing and like doing this and, talking about music. And we hit
uh-huh.
it off. It was like,
Yeah.
it was like
Like a
love.
new brother.
Yeah, it was really something.
So then the spirit of Stomu like was part of the drive. What year was this? Just to give some context.
That was probably like 73, 74.
Okay.
And so, I mean, I wanted to do this percussion stuff, and he wanted to put a pop group together, you know? So he had Steve
Yeah.
Winwood ready to go.
Okay.
And
Uh-huh.
and he had a guy named Klaus Schultz who I hadn't heard of.
Okay. Yeah,
And
for
so
sure.
the thing that I learned, Dave, from this is where I learned from Stomy and Mashta is if you do interesting things, you're going to meet interesting people.
I love
And
that.
that's the path unto itself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You open yourself up to that
Yeah.
because you attract different kind of people. I noticed that filmmakers, fashion
Yeah.
designers, all these people would come around and hang out with Stomu because he was cutting edge. And then
Yeah.
meeting Klaus Schultz, he was unbelievably cutting edge, who was one of the first major slaves. Then I met Klaus and started doing stuff with him. So I'd already had these influences
Mm-hmm.
when record idea had come.
Okay.
Comes to compassion.
And how did Olatunji factor in? Did you, I mean, assuming you met him and
Yeah, so
developed
here's
it?
what happened with
Yeah.
that. So I started this record with a Seattle sound sculptor named Jeff Grinke. Well, I'd already worked with Steve Roach as well, another master of this stuff. I obviously like ambient music, and as a drummer, I want to insert myself in there somehow. And in the meantime, somewhere in the 80s, I did a project with the original guys from Santana called Abraxas Pool.
Mm-hmm.
It was everybody except for Carlos. It was
Mm-hmm.
Neil Shaw and everybody else. And one of the tracks that we did was we redid Jingo, a song that was on the first Santana album. And this song was written by Baba Olatunji and was on his album that came out in the 60s. It was called Jingo Loba.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Santana electrified that and made it a piece of music before I was in the group. And so the idea was we redo Jingo and we'd have Olatunji and his drummers come and play
Uh-huh.
on it.
Oh,
So it
cool.
would be massive and cool. And
Yeah.
so what happened is he had him and his guys do this incantation, and the sound of the voices and this, I just fell in love with it. But the rest of the guys in the band didn't want to use that. They just
Oh,
wanted
okay.
to get to the song.
I
So
see.
this was a piece sitting around for years,
Mm, mm.
you know.
So they recorded this incantation sort of spontaneously, or is something they had
It
done,
was
worked up?
discussed, but it wasn't something that like we had thought about.
Okay.
It was
Okay.
his idea.
Mm,
And so later, in piecing together this record, the idea I was into the Dalai Lama, and the Dalai Lama had been discussing that this period of human existence and evolution has got to be met with more compassion for each other.
mm,
And
beautiful.
somehow I wanted to bring the two together. And so, knowing that there was the record Drums of Passion and the Dalai Lama talking about compassion, I decided I'm going to call the record Drums of Compassion.
Beautiful.
And so that gave me also a place to identify with
Right.
in the way that I moved forward.
Yeah, it was like a compass or like
Yes.
a, yeah, like a guide. And so I'm curious about, you talk about the time it took to create
Yeah.
this project. So it was like probably like 91 to
Yes. Yeah.
96 or something like that.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing the incantation and some of the demos of early stuff that you were working on. So it would have been at least, so what is that? Is that 30 years almost? Maybe 28, 30, something like that. Yeah. So I remember the idea then, and like you were saying, I'm going to have this record, Drums of Compassion, and I've got the concept of you playing all those drums, the huge kit with
Standing up.
all the
Yeah.
toms, standing up,
Yeah.
and which I'm taking as some of the Stomu
Directly,
influence. Yeah, right,
directly influenced by
right.
Stomu, where you're
Yeah.
standing up playing in a semicircle.
So if you could speak to Michael, 1995, Michael, what would you say now to that
Well, I
guy?
realized this in talking to somebody last week because what happened was, let me give you a little backstory again, where
Sure.
I changed insurance companies and they offered 6 months of free psychoanalysis.
What an
And
interesting concept already.
I
Here's some
really
free
enjoyed
psychoanalysis. Okay.
it.
All right. Whether you need it or not, just go talk to somebody.
So I kind of jumped at the chance,
Yeah.
and the only therapy like that I'd been through before is couples therapy, and that never seemed to work out. So I bring my iPhone, I tape everyone. I felt really comfortable with the person. And then it finally came up where I said, okay, so I've got to get to this. Maybe you can help me. I've got this record that I've done, and I just adore it. I love it. And I'm trying to understand why I haven't put it out. Is it procrastination and not finishing it? Is that the typical artist thing where you're never done? Or am I afraid? Do I have doubt? Am I, what's going on with myself? And so I just kept asking the questions. And in asking the questions, I got the answer. And the answer was, why I haven't put it out is because I really love this stuff that I've done.
Hmm.
I love it. And I didn't want to just put out a record that nobody would give a shit about,
Right.
you
Okay.
know, because I'd played parts of it for my peers and nobody said anything good about it, or I mean, like
Mm.
people I come up with, and it was more like, rather than be unkind, they just wouldn't say anything, because sometimes that's worse than saying something.
Right.
It's just like nobody said a word because they like me, they don't want to hurt
Uh-huh.
my feelings. So
Right. So you
some
felt like you were getting a flat response from all these peers and
yeah,
people that you
yeah,
respected.
like flat response, like no response,
No
right?
response. Yeah.
And
Right.
so when what I realized in talking to this woman is that I really like it. And I really don't have to put it out if nobody's going to give a shit about it. I've
Right.
done something that I really value. That is enough. And in realizing that, I realized, okay, now I have to put it out because I got it. It's like I did it. I'm satisfied. Now I gave myself permission. It's time to put it out and get it off the table. So I've got many other things that I want to do. And
Right.
so and so that began the journey of really completing it. And so
Hmm.
what I would say to myself is don't doubt yourself. You're already fearless. Don't question it. Like
Right.
trust yourself more. I already had enough experience and my instincts were going in a certain way anyway.
Yeah.
Like like if you're gonna do it hard. I used to work at a record company for a while, as you recall. And one of the things I learned in working at the record company was if artists only knew that they shouldn't care at all about the record company, and what they should do is do what they really, do the work to dig deep inside yourself to make something that you really feel great about and do that hard. That's
Mm.
all that matters.
Yeah.
What the world doesn't need is you trying to impress somebody else or get approval of somebody else. What the world needs is proof of evidence that somebody has dug deep inside themselves on a journey and come back out the other side and offered it to you so you don't have to go there.
Right. Right. Wow. I
But
love
you
that.
have to go to your own place,
Hmm.
you know, so you
Yeah.
can't avoid
Right. Yeah.
anything. But
Yeah.
your job as an artist anyway, and I think this is true for
Yeah.
life, although it's easier said
Absolutely.
than done, is
Yeah.
to,
Well,
it's hard.
so I'm curious, as someone who has walked that walk, and I think you've walked it many times in your career, knowing you. And I'll add somewhere in here that I used to be your personal assistant for a while, and so I saw a lot of the choices you made. Then they weren't the common choices. You took a lot of brave choices to try things and push the envelope. You were not someone who sat back and said, "Hey, I played in Santana at Woodstock. Let's do the Woodstock reunion tour." You were like, when I was working for you, in fact, you were kind of like, "Don't talk about Woodstock, Dave. We're working on next,
Yeah.
And I know you've embraced that more, the full gamut. But I think someone who's walked that walk, I'm curious, like, how do you get deep inside? How do you do that deep work to do what really matters to you and get to that place?
Well, I think that I had natural inclinations towards other kinds of artists and art.
Hmm.
And I found myself, I mean, even at a young age, I mean, when Carlos and I did the record Caravanserai, it broke up the band. Now I like to pat myself on the shoulder and say, Carlos and I helped start Journey because the band quit. They quit and started Journey. And
Right.
it was
Wow.
because we were looking in another direction for other artists that were going on. The rock and roll thing got real tired real fast. And it was the most exciting stuff going on. What do you have? Like John McLaughlin, Miles Davis, Bitches Brew, Return to Forever. Just all this Brazilian stuff was happening. And
Yeah.
it's just like, man, you know what? I want to go, to where the grass is green, where it's growing, not where. Also, it was a period of a lot of money and drugs, and you're not prepared for that kind of success. So we went where the music is. And then even after I left Santana, I think I just kept going in other directions that I felt like I'm attracted to. And I think what
Hmm.
we should do as artists and as people is follow our instincts. I mean,
Hmm.
you got to follow it enough so that if something is in your head, you're going to hear it rather
Right.
than you're being so loud in your mind that you don't hear the guides that like say, if you like this, then you don't have to do anything with it, but explore it more.
Explore it. Yeah.
It's like if you find a writer, right? Like Amber
Hmm.
finds a writer, you're going to
Yeah.
want to explore like Patti Smith or something like
Right.
that.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, I wouldn't think that this person makes this kind of music or writes this kind of book.
Right.
I'm surprised and I love it. And I want to
Mm.
go more.
Yeah. I'll just bring my memory in here too. What I remember you doing too, though, is there's an integration process I feel like you have that maybe is unconscious even, maybe, or maybe it's just part of your natural way. But when you hear something you really love, I would remember you'd often go play along to the record, and you'd like hear it in the car, you'd hear it in the shower, you'd like sing parts of it. Like it felt like you were not just checking out Bitches Brew or I'm checking out whatever percussionist. It's like you would actually integrate that into your way of being, which as in my world as an integral coach, like I think about integration, like how do you bring that into your body? So you're embodying Stomu, you're embodying Olatunji, embodying these folks because it's not just a casual listen. It's like, is that accurate? That's my recollection.
Well, no, I'm very curious to hear your recollection. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because
Well, I
it's your
just, well,
observation.
like Amon Tobin. I remember like turning you on to one record or so, and I said, "Hey, check this out." And next thing I know, I come over and you're like playing on the kit along to the record and learning all the licks and like and just totally and the things he had sampled from jazz records and
Yeah,
smashed up and chopped up into a bunch of
yeah,
pieces. And you
yeah,
just were like totally taking it apart in your own way. And I was like, wow, like I wouldn't have thought to do that. I mean,
right,
I would have thought, oh, you listen to it and you go, that's cool. I like that. I'm
right.
inspired. But it was like more like a surgeon. You were sort of like going deep in or, really tracing the lines to a great piece of art or like trying to like, what is that like to create like that? Does that ring a
I
bell or
mean,
does that?
no, I mean that's really interesting for me to hear, Dave, like your observation.
Yeah.
Because I'm doing it, but from hearing it from somebody outside myself is
Yeah.
even more interesting. And that what the people listening should know is that on this new Drums of Compassion record, the
Yeah.
collaboration with myself and Amon Tobin.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's why I named that one. You like fully got into his thing and then said, "Oh, great, now let's work together." So
Yeah, I did.
yeah,
Another one
I
I
love that track.
pursued, you know,
Yeah, right.
I pursue these people. I mean, you know,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of people I pursued for this record that didn't happen, like Evelyn Glennie. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I pursued her, like flew down to San Francisco to have dinner and took her for a tour of EMP before it was done.
Okay.
And
Right.
we had studio time booked to go in and do something, and she canceled at the last minute. I gave the roughs to Sinead O'Connor. There was
Oh,
a period
wow.
when I was thinking, let's have some really powerful women on this, you know,
Wow.
because I thought there was a feminine side to it. But this was before, this was when it was just Grinky and myself only.
Mm-hmm.
Then I thought it sounded a little too new agey. And then I had the idea of putting on these powerful percussionists because the thing was drums of compassion, but it turned into like a different chakra thing. You know, it was like I got Ayrto on there and I got Zakir in the same day at the same time. And they were very much into it. You know, they were not critical, you know, and Jack
Mm.
DeJohnette played on it, you know, and
Yeah.
I haven't had the opportunity to get him the final record, but when I sent him a version a couple years ago, he loved it. And so it's not like you have these names on there where people expect the record to be like kicking ass, you know,
Mm-hmm. Right.
but it's not like that. And the thing is, because these players can do anything, but they also have depth and wisdom and experience
Right.
about what music really means. And it doesn't have to be fast all the time.
Right. Yeah. And again, like these are people that it feels like have been spiritually aligned with, musically
Yeah.
and otherwise. I mean, it feels like they're folks, I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
uh, I mean, it reminds me too of like you were hosting Bumber Drum. So there's this drum festival, drum
Exactly.
night in Seattle attached to the Bumber Shoot Festival for people who are listening. And you were the curator for many years, bringing people like Art Blakey and Zakir Hussain, I think played at that as well, right? I don't know if
Yeah.
DeJohnette ever played, but you were bringing like the who's who of world percussion and drumming to the stage. And there's a parallel in this album in a way. This album is so representative of you to me, knowing you from all the things you did. It's like a natural evolution. And yeah, I don't know if
Yeah.
that's
It
quite a
feels like
question,
that to
but
me
what would you
too.
say to that?
Well, I mean, in actual fact, Zakir and Ayrto played on the record because they were at the Bumbershoot Festival performing,
Okay.
and it was right across the street from Glen Sound, where
All right.
and then I set up the sessions. So it was really easy for them to just come over. And it
Mm,
was while that festival was going on that I
mm.
put them on the tracks, you know.
Okay.
And then I guess the other lesson
Yeah.
from that kind of thing is take advantage of possible situations that are sitting right in front of you
Mm, mm-hmm.
and be bold enough to ask a question like, would you consider playing on this? You know, don't
Mm-hmm.
be shy, but don't be a jerk. Be honest and heartfelt and open, and people will respond in kind. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's another lesson to learn with this stuff is the lessons that I've learned is what you're asking half an hour
Yeah.
ago. Don't doubt yourself, but keep an open heart. Don't let your ego get in the way.
Mm,
Keep curious and be open to possibilities that you may not even have imagined or opportunities that you had not imagined, but there they are right in front of you.
mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's difficult to see the things that are possible when they're right in front of your face.
Right. And I'm imagining when you're asking for these opportunities, when you're asking for this contribution from, let's say, Airto, and the album is not like, it's not with a major label. It's really you, it's a passion project in a
It's a
way,
passion project.
right?
Yeah.
Is that safe to say? Okay. And you're asking Airto and Zakir Hussain, who like incredibly well-known, world famous musicians, but you were willing to sort of risk exploring, like, hey, would you be involved in this project that I don't know what it's going to look like in its final form, or maybe you did. I don't. How did you position that when you were asking? Wait, what were you asking them to do?
Well, you know, would you want to come over and play on some tracks?
Yeah. Okay. It's that
Yeah,
simple. Yeah.
that simple, really.
Yeah.
But I think over the years I had built up goodwill with these people. They're really beautiful people, and we've
Hmm.
known each other for quite a while.
Sure.
And I think that that has a lot to do with it, like how far you can take these sort of relationships where, if you haven't taken advantage of anybody, or you haven't been
Yeah.
if you walk the earth gently, there's a lot that can come to you rather than being forceful. You have to have
Hmm.
strength, but you don't have to be forceful and be a jerk.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, definitely. And I think that's safe to say, knowing you all these years, you're a beautiful soul, my friend. Yeah, you definitely have a lot of love coming back your way. So what's it like now? Let's with the release, because I know there's been some great reviews already, and you're hearing from people that maybe played on it, and you're doing interviews like this one. And what's it like to sort of feel that release and see the
Yeah,
results of all this work?
yeah. Well, I'm going to be honest. It feels wonderful.
Mhm.
You
Yeah,
know, so
awesome.
gratifying. And the record feels like super honest for my age, which I'm going to be 75 next month.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
and a lot of the comments that I've been getting personally from
Hmm.
people that I admire are that you've made a life statement. This is like so representative of you, and people who know me. And so it feels really good. And for the first time in my life, I want more people to hear it. Usually I've just put something out, and I don't have
Next.
a label to help me promote it or this, that, or the other, and move on to the next thing, and I don't look back. But this is something that I'm feeling for the first time inclined to take the time and care and attention to try to get it to people that I think they'll be moved by it,
Mm,
and that they might tell somebody else about it.
right.
Um, because I'm not a good salesman of myself, and I
Mhm.
shy away from that, but I'm feeling different about this record, and I'm feeling more inclined to like let people know about it. You know,
Oh, that's awesome.
I have intention with this too,
Huh.
and the intention is visually, I want to win a Grammy,
Yeah,
and not just for the
why not?
record, in a few different categories as
Hmm.
well. So I just feel like let's see how far you can take this. It's an honest work. You really love it, and like don't be shy. This
Right.
is really
Right.
like, oh, I'm
Absolutely.
always the guy that's like never pushes. It's I do a lot of the work, but I don't push it, and
And
and so nobody else is going to do it. You got to
yeah.
do.
Do,
Finally, I'm learning these lessons I
yeah.
should have 30 years ago.
Do you think that comes from like the journeyman sideman mentality of like not being a salesman or not, or where do you think that's been rooted from in the
I
past?
think it's the vision I have myself as a journeyman, an artist,
Yeah.
a speaker, that type of person that doesn't pay attention to those things, and there's nothing wrong with that, but there's nothing wrong with where I'm at now either. And,
No,
and
no.
it wouldn't have been a bad thing for me to been this way 30 years ago,
Right. Yeah.
but it happens when it happens, and I'm not going to beat myself up,
Yeah. Right. Right. That's not
and enough of
productive.
that shit. Yeah.
Yeah. That's, love it. Well, it's an amazing record, and I was listening to it today before we talked to just like get in the vibe of it. And the track that was giving me goosebumps today was The Breath of Human Kindness. It just felt like there's so much in that track. I mean, the way it just kind of sits in that groove, and it just also develops in interesting ways. And I don't know, it just feels like a big bed you can lie on, and just like that feeling, like you said, music at 2:30 in the morning, or music. I don't
Yeah.
know if I'm up
Yeah.
at 2:30 much these days, but it's like music that late at night, and it's just like holding you. Like it's just the title I love, The Breath of Human Kindness, and just like to sit in
But I
that
tell you, Dave,
experience.
I mean,
Tell me about that track.
the titles didn't come to me until 3 months ago. They were
Okay.
always
Uh-huh.
water or this or that, or up
Right.
until the hour that I had to let it go for the deadline that the label had set, because I had
Okay.
already missed one deadline. And the last thing I worked on was having a keyboard player named Michael Stegner add tracks to this Breath of Human Kindness. And so I
Incredible.
went through the whole record and I thought, okay, now you've made this music, but let's make titles of the pieces that really resonate with where you feel about it as well. and the title became important. And I wanted to write something about the power of drum and frequency, and I wanted to make a statement.
Mhm.
And the breath of human kindness, it's like the piece that is yours. I
Hmm.
mean, I ended up calling it the fierce energy of love.
Which I love. I love
I
that
want
title.
it to be like,
Yeah.
because it is fierce. It is.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's it's not it's not wishy-washy.
Right.
Love with intention is fierce, and
Yeah.
human kindness is just, that's compassion.
Hmm. Yeah. Right.
Compassion. Last tune is called Hajira, which of course, who would call a tune like that? Because Joni Mitchell did, but it's the journey,
Yeah. It's a journey. Right.
and so I wanted it to have a tone and a pitch and a frequency with these titles. But the track itself was initiated by Pete Lockett,
Mm.
one percussionist from England. He plays tablas and he plays everything.
I love
And
his
he,
app.
oh my, oh yeah, I use his app all the time.
His
Yeah,
app's so cool. Drum Jam, is that what it's called? I think.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
uh,
Pete Lockett. Yeah. Incredible.
yeah.
And you've known him quite a while, right?
I met him in the '90s in Nova Scotia at a drum
Right.
festival,
Okay. Yeah.
and we hit it off. The last time my wife Pamela and I were in Vancouver, BC, he called, and he happened to be there too, doing something with Drumeo, and
Okay.
and so we were able to hook up and go have a wonderful meal and stuff. He's a great guy.
Hmm.
That's one of the things about being a musician is you just meet so many people. And
Yeah.
my wife's not a musician, but the people I've been able to introduce her to, I mean, I have to say, is that person beautiful or what? Come on, admit it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Right.
It's not
Right.
like the world you come from, because there are special qualities
Hmm.
that creative people have,
Yeah.
and
Especially the survivors, I think, right? The ones
yeah,
that
that's true too.
survive
Yeah.
the ups and downs, the turmoil.
Part of the trick in life, I think, as well, which I've said to myself in my 20s, no matter what happens in your life, I promised myself I wouldn't be a bitter old man.
Ah, wow.
And that
Mission
was,
accomplished, man.
I tell you, it's not easy. When we got into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with Santana, the same night was the Eagles and Fleetwood Mac. And one of the things I noticed, like at sound check and stuff like this, was the women, the spouses of the people that were in some of the bands were the ones that were crying so much because they'd seen their husbands go through all this stuff. Some people get all the attention, some people get all the
Right.
success and the money. And then there's like the audience felt like a bunch of roadkill, you know,
Right. Right.
like, geez. And
Yeah.
I
Be pretty
noticed
heartless
that,
business.
yeah. But that's another part of life, I think, that is really important, where you can choose to do anything. You don't have to be a musician, you
Right.
know.
Hmm.
You don't have to. You've been with me at times where I'm thinking, I don't know, I don't have to do this. I don't have to be what people, where else do I
Yep.
want to go in my life?
Yeah, you were the head of A&R, the label, you did that for a
Yeah,
while. And like even like curating the bumper drum and thing, like yeah, you would play, but you did a lot of administrative things to make those things happen, and EMP,
yeah,
you were involved in that.
yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things you can do, but you follow your instincts. And so anyway, the track, then I put my friend Tarek Bonzi from Portland on oud. We had done something together before at the Crocodile Cafe years ago
Yeah,
where
I remember hearing that. Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
Tarek, incredible fine artist and musician, and he's living in Morocco, and that's had a vibe to it. And I put my drums on it as well. And I wanted the drums to
Yeah.
be just like, this is how I describe the music I want to make. It's like skipping rocks down the river,
Hmm.
you know? And
Hmm.
so your description of how it made you feel is exactly how I want to make somebody. I want them to be comfortable enough that they can be transported.
Yeah. I mean, I just felt like I'm completely held and it was like goosebumps. And I just felt like, woof, it's just something deep there holding me. And it's not traditional music and a music like when you think of the music business or certainly not
Yeah,
it's not obviously a rock, right? Yeah, but it's this vibe that you've created, but it's still got motion to it,
yeah,
and
yeah.
it's yeah, it's just really it's remarkable. I think
It means a lot to me that exactly that you said exactly what you said. I mean, that's
just
like
the truth, man.
mission
Yeah.
accomplished.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, so just, I have to get your take on, and we haven't really spoken about it much, but I'm curious about the track we did together that you spoke about the fierce energy of love. So I have my memories of how that time went, but I'm curious how that came to make it on this album with all these people, because I look at the album credits and I have to laugh a little bit when I'm like, oh yeah, Jack DeJohnette and Sakira Sane and Airto and Amon Tobin and Dave Hill Jr. And I'm like, okay, all right, I'll take that. I'll take that, Michael. So yeah, so why did you throw me a bone? What's your reason for this track showing up?
Well,
I'm curious.
ever since the pandemic, I've been going through a lot of old stuff, and realizing, man, there's so much stuff that should be put out. And I haven't. I started doing that with Bandcamp, but
Mhm.
we did a lot of work together, you and I, like
Yeah,
music. And
yeah,
I still have extensive notes of like every setting of everything,
right, right.
And I've just pulled out the Elisa's data thing. I swear
Yeah.
I'm going to get those settings back up on the cat.
Mhm.
I spoke to Mario today, as a matter of fact.
Did you
So
really? Wow,
yeah,
awesome.
we're in touch.
Yeah.
And so it just felt like what happened was there was Ayrto, and Ayrto did a piece that stops right there. Actually, Raul and Carl Perazza from Santana did a piece, and it ended with a vocal, and then it went right to Ayrto, where he started on the pandiero, and I forget which track was right before yours, but it went so well
It's
together. It picked it up.
on the path to healing waters, and then it's like, and then we have that water phone loop thing that we cooked up.
Right, right.
Yeah. And yeah, okay. Got it. So it just kind
That
of felt like it fit in there.
it
And
felt like it fit in. It was a little nebulous. That bass thing is kind of like, where's the one? Where's the one? But
yeah, right, right.
but on the other hand, it just felt right. It just
Mhm.
felt like it should be in there, and so
Beautiful.
there we are.
Part of the tapestry, the rich tapestry of Michael Shrieve and all of the universes you
And
connected.
adding that percussionist from Germany, Stefan Moss, on
Yeah,
that was cool too. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. Oh, it's amazing.
he's doing really cool work.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I want to be respectful of your time here, but I love the lessons that you've imparted already. And I think it sounds like a lot of things that are definitely dear to my heart too, about allowing ourselves to chase after what we're most fascinated by, in this
Yeah,
lifetime. And I think that's such a powerful thing. And I just think it's like I said before we call, I don't know if we recorded this part, but I said it felt like to me this is like two or three doctoral theses for you, this album, and soon to be 75 years old, this masterpiece album with all these incredible guests, but yet it still sounds cohesive. It's like it's this world of Michael
well,
Shrieve, of all your interests and everything culminating in this beautiful statement.
yeah. I mean, the fact that it sounds cohesive after 30 years or whatever,
Right.
is really
Yeah.
something. And then another important thing I wanted to mention, because there's a lot
Yeah.
more where this came from. I kept the music to 35 or 37 minutes.
Okay.
That was on purpose. And what I've been saying is I mean, nobody listens to an album now anyway, right? So
Yeah.
it's hard.
Right. It's different for sure. Yeah. More of a
The great,
singles world, right?
yeah, the great albums of the 70s and stuff and the late 60s, they were all 18 minutes, 20 minutes tops per side.
Hmm.
So it was like 40 minutes. But now, just because you can put 75 minutes on a CD doesn't mean you should.
Right.
This is not a all you can eat buffet. It's a fine, you know.
Yeah.
So I think that's important too, that it's a intense experience, but really it's only 30, and it'll take a half hour out of your life.
Yeah. I mean, it's like a meditation, right? I mean, it's
It's
like,
like a meditation.
yeah.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well,
Yeah.
that's amazing. I think, yeah, any other thoughts we didn't touch on? Pearls of wisdom, things you're sitting on there that you're thinking it'd be good to share a message about what this album means.
Well, I mean, despite the fact that it's taken so long, there's something about it that feels just right.
Yeah.
And it feels just right at this point in my life. And I've got a whole other album already done in the wings.
Yep.
And I've got another one that you've heard some of over the years. I'm not the fastest guy in the world. So one of
Hmm.
the things I like to do is build that trust up and maybe try to put some thrust into the process so I can get more done more quickly, but hopefully trusting it
Hmm.
intuitive will help move it along rather than doubt riding shotgun.
Yeah, yeah. Right. Well, yeah, that's it. Take the wheel back, Don't let doubt drive the car. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I love that. And I love that you're always, keeping things forward. I think one thing I always appreciate is you would always have like new ideas and new things you were driving towards, never sitting back on the old thing, even though I think it's great that you're going to take some time and care to make sure this record gets what it deserves. Because I do say the 25-year or however long it is story is amazing because nobody does that anymore. Nobody
Yeah.
takes years to make an album. And the fact that you took so much time and care and assembled this through all these and edits I heard decades ago are so different now. Like you really developed things. It wasn't like you just sat on it for 20 years.
Yeah.
You were constantly developing, putting things together, hearing new things. You'd write me once in a while, say, "Hey, what did we do on that one track?" And we would talk about it. So it's like you were marinating this project for
Yeah.
that whole time, and I think that's super rare. So I hope even just that alone should get some really special attention from listeners that like, hey, this is
Yeah.
decades in the making. Because most of the music you hear right now, the however many thousands of songs are uploaded every day to the digital world,
Yeah.
is like most of them are made in like a week or less,
Yeah.
or a couple weeks, maybe a month here and there. But very few things take years. So anyway, I think that's really a notable and cool
Uh,
thing.
I I hope that side of me is done because I don't have
Yeah.
another
Well,
30
now
years.
you've done that. Yeah, right. Right. Yeah, well, I hope you do. But yeah, we'll see. So, do you want to say anything about what's next, or do you want to just say everyone should enjoy Drums of Compassion in a quiet moment, laying down, relaxing, and feeling into this music?
Well, I must say that it is best listened to in a quiet space. It's not background music, even though it could well be background music. But the
Yeah.
you could have it like be ambient background music. But the
Yeah.
experience you want to get if you plug in to it is when the world is turned off. I mean, remember, this is music made for 2 a.m. listening.
Yeah.
So it's best when the lights are down and you're going to get the full effect when you can put headphones on.
Headphone treatment for sure. Yeah, I definitely recommend. I
Yeah.
mean, there's so much going on. Just even like the opening, the call of Michael Olatunji with the panning of the drums, like
Yeah.
how you're playing this huge drum kit. How many piece drum kit is that for the record?
16.
16 piece. So
Yeah.
16 drums, and it's like they're all over the stereo field, and it's
Yeah.
it's a super rich experience, like to folks who
Oh,
haven't.
Dave, wait till you
Yeah.
hear the Atmos mix that Don Gunn
Oh,
did
oh, okay, sweet.
on that piece. You
Yeah.
know,
Oh, that would be great.
if you listen to him at his place with the speakers on
Mhm.
the ceilings and stuff,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
oh my God,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Big shout out there too, and thank you to Don Gunn,
Don
who
Gunn and Eric Oz, who was with me for 20
Eric
years.
Oz, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And
Beautiful.
yeah, so I mean, really, there's people that stuck with me on this thing. It's like my own Fitzcarraldo, you know what I mean?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And I do have stuff coming out. I'm putting out, next thing I'm doing is I'm putting two separate singles out
Okay.
from two separate projects.
Mm.
And one of them is with Patrick Gleason and Sam Morrison,
Oh,
which
I've
came
heard
from
some
the
of that.
show,
That's really
the
great.
show that you were at. And so I say I'll do something that'll be years earlier, but also I think the trick is don't discount it. Don't
Mm.
discount it. I'm sure you go through stuff like a lot of stuff that we did.
Hmm.
There's gems
Hmm.
in there that should
Totally.
be paid
Yeah.
attention to and like
Yeah.
shine
I'd
and
love to revisit those. That'd be fun. So we
cut them
should,
and edit them and
yeah, right.
no,
I mean,
and,
that's the thing. I think a lot of times, we're as artists and musicians, we often think we're the judge. And sometimes I think that can bite us, like in a way, maybe we're more like the conduit, right? Or we're more like the channeler, and we're
yeah,
bringing things out. And the second we start trying to say, oh, is this worth anything?
exactly.
Like I talk about that in the book about, hey, we can't really know what the audience is experiencing or how they'll experience it or interpret it.
Yeah.
They're not there. They didn't notice that the mic is distorting on this one
They don't
channel
know they
or
don't know
yeah,
all the shit that went on in your
maybe
head.
they like it even,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I've learned in the pandemic. One thing I wanted to mention to you is that something that you talked about in one of your videos or your blogs. I go through this. This is a major hindrance for me in my desire to want to work with technology. As I get older and my plane isn't the same, and there's things that you can do with technology, and I very much want to do. I remember you saying, just setting this up to do this video today, you said the mic wasn't working and this wasn't working and this and this. And just to get to this point, I had to go through all these steps and levels of frustration just to be here with you now.
Right. Yeah.
And you said, and that's part of the process.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
And I thought, oh boy, I know that one, brother. It's,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
oh my God. I mean, it's like
It's
I was born like a year, two, 10 late, where the synapse doesn't take to certain things. And I swear I want to get better at the technology and get a workflow that is really super creative so that I'm not always like, I can't even get it working, or I can't.
right. Right.
And I put myself down all the time. You know what I've been through with
Yeah. I
this.
know you're very hard on yourself. Yeah. Absolutely.
But I mean, the only reason I'm hard on myself is because I can't get the shit working.
Right. Well, it's like this is the tension in creating, right? And I talk about like the tension of intention, like that we want something and we're not there yet. And so there's this inherent like we're trying to get to this place over here. I use like a rubber band, and I'm like we're trying to get up here, but we're still stuck here. There's like an anchor holding us back here, going, well, I don't quite know how to, and it's like I think the frustration piece is like, can I just embrace this frustration that's part of the journey anyway? It's going to be part of the journey. If
That's
I'm doing something new and exciting and pushing the envelope, it's going to be frustrating, you know?
there's a
And
learning curve, and you have to
yeah,
be willing to go through that.
yeah. And so I'm curious, like, was the video I made helpful to see that maybe that's part of what we can embrace or have some
Yes,
compassion around?
I thought
Yeah.
I thought that what
Yeah.
you said held a lot of wisdom in that.
Okay.
That's part of the thing you're going to have to embrace, is that
Yeah.
all these things get in the way. It's like Stephen Pressfield talking in The War of Art. He
Distance.
calls it gravity. That's his term for it. Like, anything that gets in the way is gravity,
Right.
and
I
you
feel
have to
that.
be so committed to getting past that. It's
Mhm.
almost like a warrior mentality.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not easy to create, not easy to live a creative, fulfilling, exciting life, you know? It's like, it doesn't just roll down the hill, I mean, that's part of the desire too, right? That's the
Yeah,
interesting thing is like, if it just like, if you could just roll out of bed and go to the stadium and have the 5-star meal delivered to your plate before you jump up there and play drums in front of thousands of people, you probably, get a little boring after a while. It might
yeah,
take a couple weeks, but after a while you'd be like, where you like what you said when you left rock and roll a bit in a way. You said like we're doing caravanserai because that's the stuff that's interesting to us. And
yeah,
that's where we're wanting to go somewhere and it even broke up the band. I mean, talk about tension, right?
yeah,
Uh, I mean, in a way we can't help ourselves, but enjoy that human spirit that like we want something,
yeah.
you know,
And trust that.
trust it. Yeah.
But man, I mean, doubt riding shotgun is really an important phrase, because you got to trust yourself and you got to do it hard. It's not wimpy.
Yeah, right. Trust yourself hard. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. Man,
Well,
well, it's so rich exploring with you. I could talk all day and listen to you all day. I appreciate your artistry and friendship so much. You've been a huge mentor to me and helper along the way. And, I feel really lucky that I met you and got to work with you those years. And then here we are decades later talking about a crowning achievement and something to celebrate for you and us. I mean, I'll take a little credit, but I think it's
yeah, absolutely.
but really
Yeah.
you're getting this album done after talking about it and thinking about it and obsessing about it and all those frustrations. And here you are, it's amazing. So I hope you just continue to smile each day and all the way to that Grammy acceptance speech.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
man.
I really
It's
appreciate it.
it would be well deserved. All right.
Right.
So there it is, my interview with Michael Shrieve, longtime friend and inspiration of mine. And it was a lot of fun to edit this and put this together for you all. We could have talked for hours, and I tried to make it as intelligible as possible. Hope you don't mind a few jump cuts and whatnot. And hopefully you'll check out Drums of Compassion. What an amazing crowning achievement for Michael Shrieve. His career, 30 years in the making. Some of the greatest percussionists and musicians on the planet played on this album. And I'm just so proud I'm a part of it and showing up on it. It's amazing. So hope you enjoy the interview. Love to hear your thoughts. And also the thoughts that Michael brought up about the many challenges he overcame to make this project happen. Because that's the sort of world that I coach around and am interested in helping people with, and how we move past these creative blocks and get through that frustration that he talked about, and recognize that even with self-doubt and all the trials and tribulations it takes to get a project like this launched, it's worth it. It's worth it to dig in and keep going. So take care. See you on the next video.